Mhm. Welcome back to New Realities. I am here with one of my favorite people, one of my favorite researchers in the field of UFOs and intelligence and consciousness, Grant Cameron. Grant, thanks for being here. And
well, thank you, Alan. I always appreciate having a chat with you because we sort of are going down the same road, I think.
well, I think everyone in the phenomena is seeing that this is about something else. It's not about lights in the sky. It's about what you're saying, consciousness. I have to say, Grant wrote an excellent chapter in my book. I took it actually from his lecture on the theory of wow. And why don't you just do a little overview of, not the chapter, but consciousness and how consciousness is really key to understanding the UFO phenomena.
Well, consciousness, as you may know, was always a dirty subject. What happened was that the early quantum physicists, a lot of people don't realize this, the early quantum physicists were all realists. And that included Werner Heisenberg, Bohr, Planck, Schrödinger, von Neumann, Wigner. All these guys all believed that consciousness was primary and that matter came in secondary. And they would make these statements like nothing is behind consciousness. What you think is matter is not really matter. And they would make these things. And then what happened, I believe, was that, I'm going to forget his name. The guy, the old expression was shut up and calculate. Richard Feynman, supposedly,
Yeah.
and there was a denial that Richard Feynman said it, but somebody said it, shut up and calculate, which is basically the idea that the quantum physics formulas were very, very exact, more exact than anything they'd ever come up against. And they were used for all the modern electronics, all the modern world is built on quantum physics calculations. But he said, let's calculate and build stuff and forget about the philosophical implications of consciousness. We don't want to discuss this. And it became a dirty word. And you can even see things like if you've seen the video that was made by the woman who had the brain tumor, where she talked about
Jill Bolte Taylor. Jill Bolte
Taylor, about the fact that it was a very dirty subject, that you could not bring this up in a dissertation or anything like that. And it wasn't until just about the same time that I had the consciousness download that everything changed, even in the UFO community. When I first came forward, I think there was just basically Colin Andrews, who was running around and talking about this consciousness importance. I heard his lecture. I had this sort of a download experience that basically said to me, you wondered in 1975 what's going on, because that was what happened. I had these two sightings, dramatic sightings in 2 days in 1975. And I saw the thing flying away and I said, but what's going on? Like, why are they at this small town? I couldn't figure it out. And so I spent my whole life trying to chase who had the answer to what I saw. I figured, like, I didn't know what was going on, but somebody's got to know what's going on here. And I made this sort of long chase, and it basically came to me, you know what, you want the answer to what that 1975 question? This is the answer. It's all got to do with consciousness. So I started talking about it, and as you probably know, I took a lot of flack for it. Everybody thought, well, Grant's lost his marbles. He was the presidential UFO guy, and suddenly he's gone off his rocker or whatever. And there's still a lot of people in the UFO community who believe that, who are still in this sort of materialistic paradigm that, this is going to be nuts and bolts, and they may have found some way to come through a wormhole, but it's all going to be physical in the end and stuff like that. And what we've discovered since 2012, and what this new book I've got is about the fact that consciousness is the key to understanding the UFO phenomena, that unless you understand consciousness, you will not understand the UFO phenomena. You'll be swirling around in circles. That's what we've done since 1947. We've counted lights in the sky, red ones and green ones and fast ones and slow ones, and gathered the sightings and gathered all these stories together, and we've gotten absolutely nowhere. We even in this new investigation, apparently this new congressional report says that there's like, 346 sightings were obtained, and half of them we know what they are, and that's it. We just keep gathering these sightings. We keep going over the same thing all the time, and we don't move. And I always say consciousness will be primary, and it's not until you talk to the experiencers who are interacting with the intelligence that you're going to figure this out. They will tell you this, and now people are more and more starting to listen to the experiencers, but we're still in a sort of an uphill battle. But consciousness has moved a long way since 2012. I even make the joke, there's a lot of people in the UFO community who use the word consciousness. They have no idea what they're talking about, but they know it's a key buzzword. You got to use this. And they'll just sort of stick it in a lecture and move on. But when you start really looking at the phenomena, you realize this is critical. And that's where I've got this story about UFO Sky Pilots. And what it came from was I had the download experience February 26, 2012 that said, this is all consciousness. And I basically didn't know really what it meant. I didn't realize that it meant non-local consciousness. At first I thought it just meant consciousness. And I started to realize this more complex thing. And in 2013, where this book came from was I was approached by the director of UFO, the MUFON group in Phoenix, Stacy. And Stacy said, "Oh, are you still going to talk to Pam Dupuis?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess so." I didn't know what was going on or why she brought this up. I didn't know who Pam Dupuis was, but I figured I had made some sort of agreement. So I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll talk to Pam Dupuis." So she said, "Oh, okay, that's good. She's coming to the house on Monday and you can talk to her." And I had no idea. So this woman comes to the door. She's maybe in her 70s. Her partner's with her. He's got a pumpkin pie. She's got a thermos of coffee, and they come in and they open the door and they say, "What did Stacy tell you about us? Did Stacy tell you about me?" I said, "I don't know. I'm just supposed to talk to you." So that's good. She comes walking in and she starts telling me the regular story about, you know, she had a UFO sighting. She was abducted. She was in her diaper at 2 years old. She's standing in the field and the UFO's taken off. And it's that same story you hear over and over again. And she's psychic. She's doing remote viewing for the government and all this sort of stuff. And I'm listening to this sort of stuff. And it was all sort of old, you know, old hat. You'd heard these stories all the time. They were interesting, but they were the same stuff everybody else talking about. And all of a sudden she said, "Oh," and I was flying the craft. And I said, "You were what?" And she said, I flew the craft. And I said, "They let you fly the flying saucer." And the only thing that was in my head was Saudi Arabian women who at that point still were not allowed to drive a car unless there was a male in the car with them. And I'm thinking, like, they let you fly the flying saucer? I said, and she said, "Yeah, I've flown 3 different models." And so I was frustrated. I went, "So how do you fly a flying saucer?" And she said, "Oh, you do it with your mind." And as soon as she said that, I realized why Stacy had set me up with this woman, because this woman had been telling this story that she'd been flying the craft with her mind. But I'd never heard this before. I'd been 37 years. I'd never heard anybody say that you flew the craft with your mind. I thought this is total craziness. And so she basically told me a story. And as soon as she told me that story, people started coming to me. It was almost as if it was intended that I do this book, because if you look on the internet, you won't see too many stories about people flying the craft. But these people started to come to me. It was like one after another. And people would say, "Oh, I've flown the craft." And then I'd say, "Hang on, let me ask you a question. How do you fly a craft?" And then they would say, "Oh, you do it with your mind." Everybody said the same thing. And that's when I started to realize that there was this key important aspect that when you start talking to these experiencers, you get a whole range of people. So I've got 36 people in the book who describe the whole situation of how do you fly a craft. And that includes Chris Bledsoe. It includes a former United Airlines 747 pilot. It includes a retired U.S. Air Force colonel. It includes a high-ranking CIA guy. It includes all sorts of people. And they just sort of all popped up. And I would ask these people all these questions about how it was done. And it was almost like they were reading off a cue card. And it was not that they told exactly the same story, but they told the same story with a little bit different spin on it. And the example I can use is that they would all touch something. The idea was you had to touch something. So Chris Bledsoe had a beehive that was on a pedestal in the middle of the UFO, and he put his hand on this beehive. And he said you could see the handprint. It was like a CD. It had sort of the colors going through it, flashing through it. And then he could see his handprint in there. And the UFO started to change on the inside. And then somebody would put their hand on a ball, or they would put their hand on a panel, or they would sit in a chair and they'd put their fingers into these 2 holes on the end of the chair. They were always touching something. It was the same story. You had to touch it. And what they would say is this very key part that I didn't realize as well, that I guess I did heard I heard a story that was told to me about hell put off. And this was the story that the craft is alive. And I sort of heard that. There was a story about under Area 51 that they had this engine and it was touched, and it was live. And I heard this story that I heard about a general touching this craft. Somebody had told this story about a general touching the craft and it was alive. And everybody was saying the same thing. I put my hand on something, I could see in 360 degrees. And that is something that unless you read out-of-body experience literature or OBE literature or near-death experience literature, you'll hear that. People could see in 360 degrees, and it makes no sense whatsoever. It's same as a UFO. Like, why would they let you fly the craft? It makes no sense. If you're going to make up a story about being on a craft, that's the last thing you want to talk about is, oh, I was flying the craft. Yeah, sure you were. It was like, it doesn't make any sense that you would tell this story. But they'd put their hand on something and the craft was alive, and they would say, I became one with the craft. I and the craft were the same thing. And whatever I thought is what the craft did. Fascinating. And I had 36 people tell the story.
It's next level of, you know, the whole ET phenomena. It's the next level of, but let's break it down, because could it be that these beings are teaching us about consciousness itself and the application of consciousness? Like when I have a discussion with Deepak Chopra, I talked to him, he interviewed me about my book. He says, what's the big deal? He says, it's all consciousness, UFOs, ET. And I said, no, Deepak, it's not just all consciousness, it's the application of consciousness. And I think that's what these experiencers telling you, the application of this vast capabilities we have that have not been explored because it's been taboo to explore our own potential. When I teach remote viewing, everyone in the room can do remote viewing. So I think what your book is saying, there's so much more to the human being, and there's an interface between us and them. And essentially you're saying we're the same. As if we can fly their craft, then what's there maybe isn't a difference between us and whoever they are, would you say?
Yeah. And they're breaking down our sort of paradigm of materialism, where it's just another sort of nail in the coffin. Because a lot of these people, not a lot of them, there was a few of them who told the story, and you may have heard the story. You talk to experiencers and you ask them, what happened when you were a child? And they would tell a story about being on the ship. And it was told the story, Stacy's partner that used to run it with her told the story, and Pam Dupuis told the story, the same story. And the story they told was they would be sitting in a group with children, and they were a child in this group of children in a circle, and they'd be sitting there, and there was a being there. They could see the being, but they could not see the top of the being. The being was running this thing, and what they were doing is they were levitating balls, 3 different colors of balls, and they were being taught to levitate these balls. One was very easy, one was medium, and one was very hard to do, and they would do this practice, almost like they were learning this technique. So when you're flying the craft, like the one guy said, I said, well, why would they let you fly the craft? And he said, well, they told me that was my job. I was flying people off the planet. But he only remembers one time when he actually flew the craft. So that couldn't be the actual reason. They were saying, oh, that's your job, is to fly people off the craft, off the thing. I think it's basically to get some of these very unique concepts. For example, the one concept I bring is this whole idea that Stephen Greer brought, and it's in Eastern literature, is this whole idea about Maya, like Deepak Chopra would bring up. Everything's an activity inside consciousness. And that's what they're saying as well. For example, they would say, where would you like to go? And remember Ron Johnson, who's one of the experiencers, said, oh, I would like, and they said, whatever you wherever you want to go, we'll go. And he said, I would like to see the Milky Way from a distance. And they said, okay, he's sitting in a chair, he's holding the chair, and they said, okay, it's going to be very intense G-force for 1 second. And he said, in 1 second, he said he looked out the window of the craft, and there was the Milky Way off in the distance. So that would be, I would estimate 50 to 70,000 light years in 1 second. If that's true, then something's wrong. Something is wrong with our idea.
There is no time and space in consciousness. This is what we prove over and over again in remote viewing. You can remote view the future and the past, and it's all right here. I mean, the sense, right?
Exactly. That's what they're trying to get the point across to you, is that it's all here and now. And that's the whole idea. If the time and space are things that we make up, then how big is the universe? Or the whole idea, because what they'll say is what John Wheeler said when he did the eraser experiment, and it was supposed to be Einstein's successor at Princeton. He said there is no out there. Or Stephen Greer. Here's the expression of Stephen Greer, and I used to hear him say it. It's in his meditation. He says it's the old Sufi expression. You see yourself as a puny being when within you the entire universe is enfolded. And this is the idea of remote viewing. You're not going out there, you're going inside yourself. It's all within you. And that's the same idea as out-of-body experience, with the top guy in OBEs will say you're going within yourself. You're not going anywhere, you're going within yourself. Or if you take even OBEs, if you see an OBE, say you have an OBE and you're above your body, and you look back at your body, people say consciousness is in the brain. The brain is producing consciousness. But if you're in out-of-body experience state, you're looking back and you can see the head, you can see the brain, it's not there. Consciousness is the awareness, and the body is in the consciousness. That's the whole concept. And that's what they're trying to get. So when they're talking to the experiencers, they'll always say to the experiencer, they'd say, where would you like to go? And then the person would say, oh, I would like to go here. And they'd say, okay, just imagine where you want to go. You have to go within. You've got to go within. Imagine where you want to go. And the people would be told the same thing. And this whole idea that they're going there inside themselves, and that's just an idea that's so removed from what we believe, is that it may all be within us, that we are all sparks of the divine, and that we created the universe, and it's all created out of Maya. It's all this computer game thing, and that we can go within ourselves and we can access things, we can go wherever we want. And that's what they're doing. They're not coming from this far distance away. They're actually inside, it's all here. Or I talked to these beings in Great Britain, and I asked them, I said, are you ETs? And these beings, they said, oh, would you like us to be ETs? Because they had these no faces. And they said, would you like us to be ETs? We can be ETs if you want. We could even take you to our planet. But no, we've always been here. You're the visitor. And a lot of them will say that we've always been here. And everybody thinks, oh, they're hiding in the ocean. No, it says the concept is that always being here. It's all here. It's all now. It's that whole concept that we have to break down. And that's how they're doing it, is through this story of flying the ship. So people tell that story, but it has this much more deep meaning as to much more than flying the ship. It's got to do with this idea of how does time and space work, and the fact that we have the ability to do anything we want, that it's all within our mind. And that's where we go when we die. We go within ourselves, and that it's all just an illusion or a dream, or as the expression I always use now, when you dream, your life will suddenly become just a dream. And when you go into your next life, it will be a forgotten dream. It's this whole idea that it's this a repetition of consciousness moving from one place to another, and that we're creating the universe, that it's all made out of consciousness. So God didn't create the heavens and the earth. We created it. We're the ones that created the heavens and the earth, and we're creating it. And it's a cycle that we take stuff within ourselves, we recycle it within ourselves, and we take that information, and the universe gets smarter, and it gets bigger, and it gets more grand. And that's what's happening, is this cycle of us recycling this stuff, putting it into the ether, to the Akashic record, and the universe just becomes grander and grander all the time.
Well, no, I think I'm totally agreeing with everything you're saying. Could it be that if they've always been here, well, there are a couple of things that come up. First of all, the Donald Hoffman thing, that time and space is doomed. You know, there is no subject object, that whole duality that's been created in Western science, that there's an object and stuff, that's also doomed. But what about the whole abductions, taking genetics, these hybrids? Could that just have been a kind of play in a drama we created, and that didn't really happen? That's not really going on either. I mean, what about that level?
Okay, but that goes to the whole idea. Like, I had the second download in 2016, 2017, which basically said to me, to give me 24 things. And I had to quickly, I was trying to write this as this was happening. I'm on a street, walking down a street, and this is happening. And one of the ones it gave me, is it made out of nuts and bolts? Is the universe made out of nuts and bolts? Okay, if that's true, then that's one world. But if the world's made out of consciousness, that's a completely different world, and all the rules are going to change. And then they said, is it one life? Which most people assume it's just one life. If it's one life, then that's one world. But if it's multiple lives, then everything changes. And that's the idea behind abductions. When you ask Marie Rodwell, Mary, if you regress everybody back to birth, how many people will say that it was a soul contract and that they agreed to this? And she said, oh, 100%. And then I asked Kathy Martin the same question. I said, Kathy, what do you think about the soul contract idea, that that this is part of the play, that we came in and we agreed to this abduction thing for whatever we're doing? And she said, you always wondered about that. So I had myself regressed, and I actually heard the words come out of my mouth. I agreed to this. And that's the whole thing. So if it's an agreement, then we're coming in, it's like a play. It's like the idea that you are an actor on the play. You're not the actor. You are playing an actor on the stage. And because you played King Henry VIII in high school doesn't mean you're King Henry VIII for the rest of your life. You're not King Henry VIII. You're Alan. And it's you're the person behind it. And you see so much of the spiritual literature always says the same thing. Remember who you actually are. And that's what we forget. We are the observer. We are the between the words. We are the silence between the words, all that kind of stuff. That we are the observer of what's happening.
But the whole idea of just lifetimes is also an illusion, because we're like, if you see those Alex Gray paintings where there's a being in the middle of this grid, and that's where we are right now. We are in that perfect space, and all this is Maya, illusion. So lifetimes, ETs, time, space, that's all being fabricated. But that goes with, like Deepak Chopra saying, it's all consciousness. But there's also this thing, me and you and everyone maybe listening in, we're moving through history. If you say it's all consciousness, you go outside of history, back to that place of totality and oneness. But there's also this other thing. So it's being and becoming at the same time. Something else is happening where we're moving through this illusion of time and space for whatever reason, right? So it's a sort of duality there.
But it's the illusion of time and space. We create the illusion of time and space. When we create the physical world, we need time and space, because you need that in the physical world. So we're creating this, and we create these ups and downs. It's like, if you've ever heard the comedian, and his name always escapes me, but he has this thing called The Ride. He says, you get on the ride, and he must have had some sort of experience, because he hit it dead on. He said, you get on the ride, and it's so real. You actually think it's real. And you go on the ride, and it goes up and down, around and around, and there's all sorts of lights, and there's noise. And then you get to the end, and you get off, and you go, oh, that was just a ride. And that's the thing. We're creating this, and you create these ups and downs. So we have good and bad. So we say, oh, this is good, that's bad, whatever. And when you look at a movie, it's all just this up and down. It's like, if you had a movie and you didn't have these ups and downs, these positives and negatives, everyone's going to walk out of the movie in 15 minutes. I mean, God wants this movie that has all this sort of stuff, and we're having these plays and doing these things that are getting points across. And the abduction thing, maybe, doing other planets or whatever. But the key thing to me is that when you start talking to experiencers and you start having these discussions about what about this, what about that, and you start looking, you realize it gets more complex and more complex and more complex and more complex. And that's why I say it's going to be the phenomena, whatever it is, it's going to be a lot less physical than people think it is. It's going to be way more spiritual than people think it is, which is going to really upset a lot of people. It's going to be 1,000 times. Easy, 1,000 times more complex than what you think it is, and it won't have a hint of capitalism. It's almost like David Bohm used to say. He'd have this story about, he says, when you figure out quantum physics, when you get to the bottom of that and figure that all out, there's just another level below that. And the scientists say, no, there's not. And it's this idea that the more you look at it, the more complex it gets. And you realize that we have just a minuscule amount of intelligence, and that the way you learn is to go, and they're trying to teach us indirectly, not directly, but through these indirect stories where we tell the stories and then they tell the stories, almost like the theory of wild thing. Like, why do you make crop circles? Why don't you just put down the thing? Because everybody goes, oh, they got a crop circle. Oh, and people are categorizing, and showing them on TV shows and stuff like that. And it has to be weird. It has to have this up and down like a movie where you're sitting on the edge of your seat all the time. Otherwise, people don't pay any attention if it's all the same thing. So it's going to be very, very complex the more I look, but you've got to talk to the experiencers, and you've got to start linking into people who have had these sort of experiences when they've gotten through sort of this physical link, where whether it's people who've meditated, Hindu, Buddhist, all that kind of stuff, where we suddenly realize these guys from 5,000 years ago had it all figured out already. We thought we were stupid because they couldn't build a cell phone. And in fact, they understand this idea of Maya, and now people are starting to understand. And a lot of the quantum physics guys in the early 20th century were going to Indian gurus and learning from them, because they realized there was this component. And that's what I think the UFO community has to make that move. And I think it's made a big move in 10 years over this consciousness thing. We're starting to move, and the experiencers are less and less sort of ostracized. People are starting to realize, yeah, maybe they got something. And the thing with the book is that you got 36 people who are all telling this very, very bizarre story. And it's almost like Nolan said, one story is an anecdote, 2 stories is evidence. And I say 36 stories plus need to be investigated. You've got to look at this and you've got to explain, how do they have this crazy idea that they're flying the ship? And they would explain other people in that tell the story also describe other weird things. And one of the common things they describe is this 360-degree vision. This makes no sense whatsoever. That they would tell the same story that near-death experience people and out-of-body experience. And the other one they tell that Hal Puthoff said that he would like to figure out. Hal said, I'd really like to know how the craft can be bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. So people will say, like Terry Lovelace said, I went inside, it was like sort of a ship on the outside. It went inside, it was the size of a football stadium on the inside. And then Chris Bledsoe actually looked back outside and then he looked inside the ship and it was bigger on the inside it was. And I heard even crash saucers, the story that people describe this even as the crash saucer, that it's bigger on the inside than it is outside. And the beings will actually tell you they can make the ship as big as they want. And that was what Pam Pui told me, which is very bizarre. Unbelievable that I still didn't believe it then, that now I'm starting to believe, well, maybe it's true. She said they have ships that are the size of solar systems, or you can actually get solar systems that are inside a rock, where you go inside the rock and there's a whole civilization inside that rock. It's this whole idea, if there's no time and space, if you can make the ship look like a little orb, which is now the big thing. It's no longer flying saucers, it's just these orbs. And people say, what's inside the orbs? It's aliens, it's ships or whatever, that they can actually have this little tiny orb, and it could be like a whole civilization of aliens going around in this little orb it's this idea that the ship can be way bigger. And a lot of experiencers are told we can make the ship as big as we want on the inside. And that's the idea. They're building it out of consciousness. It's not like they're building the ship. And one guy, the head of MUFON for Japan, is one of the people who's flown the ship. And he talks about the fact where he went and they pulled a book. There was a wall, a wall that was completely seamless. And they went and they pulled a book with information out of the wall and stuff like that. You start hearing these stories, and I think that's what they're doing. They're upping the ante. These stories didn't have before, and the intelligence keeps almost like they're returning the pages of a book, and it gets more complex. It changes. We don't have cattle mutilations anymore. We don't have ground traces anymore. Okay, now we're going to do people singing light language, and now we're going to have people flying the ship, and it's this thing where they're doing these weird things where we're chasing this thing, but at the same time we're raising consciousness by talking about these elements of consciousness, what's going on, and people get sucked into that. They're interested in stories about being inside the ship. What was it like? What's it, stuff like that, and indirectly they're learning, and then you get to the whole thing where you're not trying to solve the information for everybody, because as Planck says, you do not convince your opponent by convincing him your argument is right. It moves one funeral at a time, and the new generation is not offended with the idea. So if you talk to young kids about this kind of stuff, about flying the ship and about instantly going to other places in the universe, well, then you ask them, you go, well, of course. I mean, they got the video games, like even my assistant Nicole, her kid, and I'm trying to get him on video. He's like 7 years old, and 6 he's had the 3D glasses. And he's got these 2 wands, and he's going like this in the room. She said she'll come in the room. And he's just standing in the middle of the room. And I said, well, what's he doing? He's building things, and he's like a little inventor, and he's building. And that's the whole idea. Is they've got this idea already, this 3D world that we can build things. It's not offensive to them. So I think this is just a new thing, because I'd never heard of them flying the ship. And now we're starting to get these people who are coming forward with these stories, or the stories that the craft is bigger on the inside, and these really weird stories that raise consciousness by making it really weird. People are trying to figure out what's going on, and it's almost like the anomaly. Gary Nolan said the same thing. He said, what you want to look at the 5% of material that does not fit the bell curve, that's outside the bell curve. Why is that? What's going on there? And that's the whole idea, that you look at the anomalies. That if the material world was the way they said it was, this wouldn't be happening. People wouldn't be flying ships instantaneously across the universe, wherever they want to go in 1 second. The whole idea is that the anomalies tell you something could be wrong with your mathematics and your understanding. And he said that's where you win the Nobel Prizes, is you go after the anomaly and figure out the anomaly, because it tells you what we've got wrong, and then you figure that out. And that's what they're doing. They're producing these real weird anomalies that people are just going, what the heck's going on here? And people start to study it, and we move on, because we've been doing completely different stuff, Alan, than we were doing 30 years ago. There's no way we were talking about this kind of stuff 30 years ago. And the new people don't realize that. They don't realize that we used to, exchange letters and wait for tapes to come in their mail and stuff like that. It was just a totally different world where there was no abductions until, the heel came. Yeah. And there was no grays, there's no reptilians till the 1980s, and people don't realize these things, that there's these patterns that are changing, and people think it's always the same. And I always tell people, you got to realize there's patterns here. It's almost like they're unveiling this thing one piece at a time to different people.
Well, this brings up so much that to me, just like, so there's two tracks in a sense. There's the track where it's all consciousness and we're sitting in bliss here at the edge of forever or in forever. And then there's a progression that's happening to people who are at least aware. And it's not about aliens or anything else. What you're saying, we're tracking the movement of consciousness itself, what consciousness is capable of. That's the phenomena, really. That's what it's really about. It's pushing our awareness of the application of consciousness. That's what I think you're saying. And so
there's examples outside, not just UFOs. It's happening all over the place. I just got a report done by Deb Frew, who runs the Metaphysical Tribe conference in Illinois every August. And she went to a seance, and I was big time interested in physical seances because of this bizarre report thing. And she gave me the report today. This just happened yesterday or day before, where she goes to the seance and they take the medium and they put water in the person's mouth and they put tape over their mouth and stuff like that. They put them in a box and tie them up and all this kind of stuff. And then she said all this stuff is floating around the room and stuff, and everybody's had no cell phones, and they seal all the doors and the windows and the cracks and all that kind of stuff. And then she said at the end, all these reports started falling out of the ceiling. 100 reports. So why is somebody dropping 100? And I got a picture of these, all these sort of gems and stuff like this that were falling out of the ceiling at the end of this seance. And they picked up all these things. So why is somebody dropping these things out of the ceiling? Because they want everybody to go, what the hell? What's going on here? And people are trying to figure it out. And it raises you to this effort. Like once you get in, you can't get out of it. So it happens in there. And I even say to people, if you want to understand what's happening with the UFO phenomena, like how do they get here? What are they doing? I always say one of the most important stories I ever heard in my life was Leslie Kane telling the story about being in the physical seance with Stuart Alexander. And she said, and I said, how many times, Leslie, tell me about the hand. Did that actually happen? And she said, yeah, it happened. And I said, how many times it happened? Well, I saw it a number of times, she said. And she'd be sitting at this table. And this is Leslie Kane from the New York Times, wrote the New York Times article, and all this kind of stuff. She's sitting at this table. There's a red light underneath the table. And she says this watery stuff starts to come up on top of the table, moves across the table, starts to form, and it forms into this hand. And this hand. And she said, I touched it. I shook the hand. She said it was as real as a real hand. She said I could feel the knuckles and the tendons, and it was warm and it was soft like a child's hand. And she said it was a real hand. And then it banged on the table twice, and then just went and went back into this stuff and underneath the table. And that's what you got to realize. Like this stuff can come into our environment, that we're vibrating at a certain level, and they can change their vibration, come in to our world, manifest, and then go back. We can do the same thing. Almost like if you've ever interviewed Yossi Ronan, who's got this #1 book out of UFO book out of Israel. He wrote a book called One, the concept that they told him, the concept of one. And they said, when we come into your world, we take on a body. We can take on whatever body we want. We don't need a body, but when we come into your world, we need the body. You can do the same thing. You just don't realize that. And so they come in, they do these little songs and dances, and people get it, and they tell the story. And that's why they're doing it. In the physical seances, that's why they're doing all this kind of stuff. They want to show off. They want to do, like I say, to people. They talk about the Nimitz. Oh, the Nimitz. I said the biggest story about the Nimitz was, why did it drop from 80,000 feet down to sea level in 7/8 of a second? Why did it do that? It was showing off. It said, watch this. And everybody, holy shit, did you see that? It dropped 7. That's impossible. It could possibly do that. It's just saying, watch this. Or when they had the thing about the threat, They said, oh, the threat. They came within a couple of inches of the plane, and these balls with the cubes inside them that were touching inside the ball, and they come within an inch of the plane. I could just see the UFO people who was ever on the other side saying, hey, Zogar, I bet you I can get closer to the plane than you can. They're flying. And that's the thing. They want this dramatic stuff where everybody's telling these stories, but yet we're realizing something's going on. We get to that point, and then we start to figure it out. We get a little bit of this. We accept this. We accept that. The young kids come along, and it's so far removed from the 1950s and 60s when it was just straight aliens coming here from other planets and telling us messages of love and peace and all this kind of stuff. It's completely changed.
No, I get it's completely changed, but are they just doing this for us? I mean, is there an evolution? Like, this is our time track, and like we're the dumb ones, and we're being educated and expand. But do they have their own, in your opinion, progression of awakening? And is that what the reason for interaction? Or are they just the teachers saying we're going to teach those people? I think they have their own evolution, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I think it all works on that way. That the concept is that these sparks of the divine go out and they create the universe, and it's just to make the universe bigger, more magnificent, more dramatic, and more ideas of new types of things in the universe. And that's what it always is. It's because we're in the capitalist world. We're the only ones that have come off this track. Where it's about how many rape, pillage, kill, and steal. Whoever's got the most toys when they die wins. It's that kind of thing. When you get to that level, it's all altruistic. That's what it's about. It's about helping the universe become a better place. So they're altruistic and they're coming, and that's part of the role. That's what we're supposed to do. It's like when you get into the spirit world, and people always say, "Oh, I'm going to get off the karmic wheel. I'm not coming back." And I said, "Well, sure, you're going to come back. Once you get on the other side, you're going to know what's going on." Nope, not come back. Nope. And I said, "Well, how long can you sit on a beach in Hawaii? How many billion years can you sit there and drink Mai Tais? Come on." You want to come back because you say your kid is in trouble, or your grandchildren are in trouble, or your country's in trouble. You're not going to come back and try to help? Yeah, sure, I'm coming back. Most people, they haven't got that idea. They've forgotten the idea of why the universe has been built, is to make the universe a grander place. It's not about trying to get as many physical items as you can. It's the old idea. When you die, your life just becomes a dream. And when you get to the next life, it's a forgotten dream. It's not about that. It's about going through these lives and trying to make the universe a better place. It's all altruistic. We're the only ones that aren't, that are into this self, because we're in the physical universe, we believe in separation. We believe in self. We don't realize the one, that we're part of the one. And it's the old idea that if you realize you're part of the one, then you're going to do the right thing. You're not going to cut your arm off. You're not going to go and shoot yourself in the head. That's what we're doing. Every time we injure somebody or something, we're doing it to ourselves. We are part of the one. And that's the concept they're trying to get. So it's all altruistic to me. It's all about trying to build the universe bigger. We're the only ones that don't understand that idea.
No, I get what you're saying. And it is an evolution. It's a spiritual evolution, but we're in the schoolhouse earth. And there's people in kindergarten saying, yeah, I want more toys. And the other people saying, no, it's all consciousness. And I guess we're here for a reason to learn that. But there's also a unified field. So because the government's been lying for 75 years and keeping secrets and wanting control, there's this little battle that might be part of our lesson. But is there any movement, do you feel, or maybe there's not supposed to be, on the part of the people holding on secrets, saying, no, we're never going to tell you anything. You don't deserve it. You're not smart enough. Yeah.
I'm about to write an article on that. And that's, I think, the way I look at that is the military is, I call it the national insecurity budget and the national insecurity people, because that's basically what it is. I mean, it's about get an enemy. If you don't have an enemy, nobody's going to give you any money for weapons. You have to create an enemy. And if you don't have an enemy, you create an enemy. So it's all about us and them. It's a real separation thing. That's the whole mentality of the military. I'm in Canada. We're going to get you in the United States, and I hate this country and China and Russia, and we've got all these enemies all of us, and we got to get more. And it's like a general. If you're a one-star general, what do you think about Allstate? Being a two-star general, we need more people. I need more people under me. And so it's that mentality that we go towards, and you live in that environment. But I forgot what your question was.
So the question is the government, are we,
the government, yeah.
Will there be graduation? Yeah.
No, the government, the government looks at it that way because it's not controlled. I don't think so much by the government. It's controlled by the military, by the military industrial complex.
Well, whoever's controlling it, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it's the people who are building the weapons because the highest classified stuff. That's why I said, Walker asked the question. He said, why should we change the rules to satisfy your curiosity? And that's what it is. Basically, on the bottom line, all it is for the American people is that they're curious. And if you're the guy with the military, you're saying, "Oh man, we're not going to give this to the Russians." I mean, oh my, the amount of stuff. Like they went to Skinwalker Ranch and the bulls were inside the trailer. How do you get the bulls inside the trailer? How do you make all this stuff disappear? How do you talk in somebody's head? When these three guys had this voice in their head and said, "Leave, you are not welcome." How do you do this? Well, we'd love to be able to do this. Well, we could have this weapons. We could use it against the Russians and stuff like that. So they're not going to give up that technology because they realize they haven't got it. They haven't developed the technology, but they're going to be working on it, and we're not going to give it. And we don't care. That's what the Walker said. Why should we change the rules? He was the military industrial complex. He was the chairman of the board of the biggest military think tank in the country. He said, why should we change the rules? And the other question he said, really important, was, and here's a question you answer for me. When you get the answer, Ellen, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do then?
When I get the answer about what? That it's all consciousness?
About what's going on. About what's going on.
When I get the answer, I think it's what you're saying. We all rise to the level where we understand consciousness and the application of consciousness.
Not that high a level. Just the idea that there's, say, extraterrestrials. Say there's extraterrestrials here. And then what are people going to do? They're going to go to work tomorrow, just like they're doing today. It's really not going to change anything. And I say to people in America today, Alan, do you seriously think, and we have this idea that, well, are we going to allow reptilians, greys, and mantids to immigrate to the United States of America and walk around the streets of the United States of America? Are we going to allow them to build a car factory, which they can build in about a week, and they've got free labor because their people don't get paid, and they've got free energy, and they can build cars with 1,000-year advanced technology? Are we going to allow them to open factories in the United States? This is going to be the ultimate enemy once we figure it out. And so that's the thing is what are we going to do when we get the answer? Is we're just going to turn it into another enemy, which is what they're trying to do.
Well, that's why you said before in the beginning, science and civilization progresses one funeral at a time. And it may be the old guard that was saying it's nuts and bolts, it's weapons, it's, protecting ourselves, are dying out, are leaving, and there's a bifurcation in the vibrational field. I know that's a little out there, but the planet itself is uplifting, so more people are having this conversation, right, Grant?
Yeah, and it does go back and forth. It's like the Marx used to talk about Karl Marx, the thesis and antithesis, that it moves back and forth, and that's what's happening now. You see it moving back to the right. It was going, and now it's moving back to the capitalist. We need stuff, and America first movement. It's just us, separate us from the world. We're not part of the world. We don't want one world government. We want 190 countries run by the United States of America. We just won this thing. Don't give me that, and the woo-woo stuff and stuff like that. The gas price is high and stuff. And so it moves back, and it moves back and forth and back and forth. And I think we're in a move back. And that people don't realize that it's not about, can we solve the problem? We always want to, because we're Westerners, we want to solve the problem yesterday. We want to get our stuff yesterday. But the thing is that this could go on for the next 10,000 years. The idea is that you and I came into the world to do something. It's not that we're going to solve the problem, but we came into the world to do something. Are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? Because it's going to be a long range game that takes forever. And people want it to happen today. So they get all frustrated, not realizing it's not about how fast it moves. It's about what we're doing in the middle of this. And if it's bad things that happen, if suddenly it moves to the shift where we become the bad guys, well, then we can learn something from that too. If you're in a concentration camp in World War II with, as a Jew, you're going to learn something.
I actually was there last lifetime. I actually have a visceral memory of that.
Exactly. Yeah. So you either learn something from that or you become the victim. And that's the whole idea, is that we want to teach people to learn from the experiences that they've got, instead of, trying to wish for something and wait for the government to do it for it. So that's what we're doing. We're waiting for the government to give us the answer, when the expression I say is, we are the ones we've been waiting for. We're the ones, you and I, that have the answer. And the Bible says, too much is given, much is expected. Do not put your light under a bushel. You and I, in fact, I say it's going to be worse if there is a judgment. when we get on the other side, you and I are in a worse situation than everybody else, because we can't say, well, we didn't know. I mean,
we're doing what, but Grant, we're at it every single day. I mean, I am,
exactly.
I know you are, and there's a whole
But-
community of people.
But that's what I'm saying. Waiting for the government to do it is shirking our responsibility. They're waiting for government. They just assume the government isn't going to do it, and then you and I are going to force this thing out. Like I said, like I had the Wilson leak document. I had the Oak Shannon notes. If I had not leaked that into the internet, we'd still be like not knowing what's going on. We would not have this written into Congress. We'd have. That's the thing, is you got to make a move at times when it's very uncomfortable, and move ahead with stuff, that we are the ones that are to put the stuff out. So when you get these stories about people that are flying the craft, then I put that out, and it gets into the zeitgeist, and it slowly moves people around to listening about it, and it elevates the consciousness. We've got to talk. We can't wait for the government. We're the ones that have to. We're the government. We're the ones that are supposed to put it out.
Well, you must be pretty proud, in a sense, not ego, but that the Wilson documents were written into the congressional record on May 19th, 2022, at that last UAP hearing in front of the House. I mean, that was excellent.
I'm probably not friends with Eric Davis anymore, but I mean, it's sort of like Eric Davis will go down in history as one of the most famous people in history because of these notes, because of I knew what he was doing back then. I knew him at the time. This is 2002 when he had this meeting. I knew him. He'd just been laid off by NIDS. He had to have a job. He's trying to get a job and stuff. He had kids and a wife and stuff like that. And I had these discussions with him, and he was very aggressive. He's a former intelligence guy, and he started off intelligence in South Korea, and very sharp guy, and had the UFO sighting the day he graduated. And this goes back to Soul Contract. Was that accidental that he had a UFO sighting that dragged him down the rabbit hole? And then he went along and he wrote these notes, which will become this sort of when the almost like when I saw them, I sort of said, this is the disclosure is the game is over once these notes come out, and they're sort of being fighting, they're faked or whatever. But if Congress is following these notes and is going to bring these people out and make them testify and stuff like that, it could be exactly what I thought when I first saw the first page of that thing. It's game over. This is game over, and that breaks the thing, and it really shifts things to the fact that the government has been involved in this. But what I think that's going to be missing is the consciousness thing. This idea that Eric Davis brought out, that in 1989 they shut the program down, and that they could not get anywhere. And every 7 or 8 years they take it off the shelf, and they realize they still can't get it. And that's the idea. Or in the Wilson leak document, at the very end of the Wilson leak document, it says, we have a craft and we think it'll fly. So what does that mean? It means they got a craft totally intact, and they can't make it go on because you need consciousness. You need a consciousness interface to turn the craft on. Exactly these people. You need someone who can turn it on with their hand, and they haven't got that. So they got the craft, they can't turn it on. And that's where you get even like the core story that was Hell put off Jacques Vallée and Kit Green. And that's when they came up with this idea. The core story is we're being visited by something. We've got some recovered material, and we're not doing very well back engineering it. And that's where I think people have sort of lost it. I think, oh, the government's got this all figured out. It's got to do with consciousness. The government is just as far behind as we were before we knew about consciousness. Before I heard this consciousness download in 2012, I tell the story seriously. I could not have spelled consciousness, and I couldn't care less. I had no idea. And it just came in this weird sort of, with the absolute certainty that came with it. And I made the move, and you see this move taking place. And I don't think the government is there. I think they understand that consciousness is involved. That's why they did MK Ultra. It wasn't that they were trying to do, mess up people's minds with drugs. They were trying to figure out how consciousness worked, because they knew the Canadian government had been already pointed out in November of 1950. We were told by high-level officials that other things might be associated with the flying saucers, such as mental phenomena. So the Canadians were told by the Americans they knew in 1950 that mental phenomena, and they've been working on it ever since, and they can't get it. And that's why they're so interested. The one expression was, because we cannot control the phenomena, we watch those who the phenomena is interacting with. And that's what they're watching indirectly, people like Chris Butzo and stuff like that, because they're trying to figure out this idea. And the people who are interacting are telling you the consciousness story. And that's where we have the disclosure taking place by the beings. It's not landing on the White House lawn, because they know they can't walk down the streets of America. As I had the discussion with Art Bell, and Art Bell told me, he said, I will shoot them one after another as they come off the craft. And I went, really? He said, yeah. It was this idea that they are the enemy. So they know they can't land on the White House lawn. They're not going to be accepted into America. And they're doing this gradual disclosure, but they're moving everybody towards it. And they've done this job without disclosing themselves, just by keeping people interested, by doing these weird things that I talk about in the theory of wow. And this is another one where they tell people you're flying the craft and this is your job and stuff. And that none of that stuff I don't think is true. But they come and tell the story, and then I put the story out, and then people sort of read it and they go, whoa, this is pretty cool. And they realize there's high level people who've had this experience of flying the craft. And we move one step ahead, and I do what I was supposed to do, and hopefully other people do what they're supposed to do. And we've got forever to figure this thing out. It's about learning lessons as we go along. We're coming back again and again and again and again, and it just make the world a better place, make it more intelligent, put out what you can, and make the universe smarter and more magnificent. And that's what it all comes down to. It's not about figuring this thing out. It's about you and I got to play in the game. We got to play in the Super Bowl of all stories. And we should realize we're in the Super Bowl of all stories, and do the best we can, and realize that most people have no clue what's going on, and that we got to play in this magnificent game. Most people live lives of quiet desperation. They go to work, they come home, they sit in the night and watch TV, they go to sleep, they do the work, and they do that for their whole life, and they have no clue what's going on.
Right. Well, a couple of things. Actually, someone in the chat says, I know who can fly the craft. I don't know, but I think he's implying maybe he flies the craft, the natural spirit. But also, could we get some of these people that you mentioned in the book to go to the military and say, okay, there's this crashed ship. Could you make it run with your? Are they doing something like that? Is that happening?
I asked Chris Bledsoe. I said, Chris, because the government is all around him. They try to put monitors on his property, and the CIA Yosemite Band goes to his birthday party every year, and
but Chris seems open to it. Chris seems like, okay, let's invite these guys in because
So I asked him. I said, did they ever ask you about flying the craft? He said, oh yeah. They brought in a general, U.S. Air Force general, and I explained to him how it was done. So he has. I asked him that question. I said, did they ever? And he said, yeah, a U.S. Air Force general asked me how to fly the craft, and I told him how to fly the craft. I think they sort of know. I think they've got these sort of things. It's almost like when Tom DeLonge was in the Lockheed skiff with the head scientist, with Robert Weiss and a third person who I don't know who it was. But he said that the head scientist said to him, I just want to know, how did they get here? How did they get here? How does it work? And he was hanging around with Stephen Greer at the time, before he broke with Stephen Greer. And he said, oh, I think consciousness is involved. And he said, the head scientist from Lockheed Skunk Works said, now you're talking. And that's all he wanted to talk about for the next 45 minutes was consciousness. So yeah, Lockheed Skunk Works knows, but the thing is, how do you move it in there? That's why I say it's 1,000 times more advanced. It's when you see them, the ability to make the ship bigger on the inside, and the ability to go instantaneously anywhere in the universe and stuff like that. People say we got the technology, we've back engineered. Baloney. We've got a little bit of stuff with metals that we may have back engineered and stuff like that. And but in terms of the stuff, it's so far advanced, it's so out there that I don't think they may understand consciousness involved, but it's still way beyond anything we've got.
Well, Grant's talking about this book that he's just come out with just now on Amazon, UFO Sky Pilots, Pilots of Peace and Oneness, experiencers who are flying the craft. Now, or anything, particularly when the experiencers are flying the craft, are they learning anything? Are they evolving? What's changing for them when they have that?
Well, they just get the basic message. They get told stuff like this is your job or whatever. But basically, the message is the craft is alive. They notice this instantaneously. The craft is alive. It's just this concept that everything is alive. Everything has got consciousness, and this would be AI. Like people say, can we ever get AI? Can we ever put consciousness inside a machine? That's we're working it backwards. The machine creates the consciousness. It's the consciousness creates the machine. Consciousness is primary. Everything is consciousness. And so the idea that what's happening here is this is AI, that they've learned how to use biological material to create a craft. They're growing the craft. It's biological. In fact, Denise Stoner, who works with Kathy Martin, tells a story about being underneath the ship, and they show her the engine, and she's talking to the engine and the ship, and it's communicating with all these other UFOs all over the universe. And she feels sorry for it. She says, oh, you're locked in here. You're just locked in. You can't walk around. You're stuck as an engine inside the ship. And he said, that's what I chose or something. Don't worry about me. And she's actually talking to the ship, and other people will give the ship names. So this is AI. But what you're doing is you're using biological material to create crafts. And so the craft is alive, it's biological. And then the other thing is you become one with the craft. This is a oneness concept, that you and the craft are one thing, that the craft is alive, you become one with the craft, and whatever you think is what the craft does. So it takes over, and then you can do whatever you want. And this thing where they say, go within yourself. You have to imagine it with.
No, go ahead, keep going. I was just adding this to my.
She just said you have to go within. They keep being told you got to go within. This is an idea that you understand, that I understand. It's all within yourself. The remote viewing, it's all within yourself. You're not going anywhere. It's all, you're going within yourself. Everything is contained inside you. And this idea of the holographic brain, and it's all in there, and the mind is feeding it. It's like a TV thing. So this is what they want us to know. It's this idea that's within us. Everything's one. The 360-degree vision, that you can, this idea that you can see everything at the same time, and that you have this power of consciousness, that everything, consciousness, you can do whatever you want. That's these basic messages they're trying to get across. And everybody's telling the same story, especially when they say, I became one with the craft. And I said, man, did I hear that a couple of times. They say the same words, I became one with the craft. And whatever I thought was what the craft did. And they thought it was really weird that, they could talk to the craft and give it a name and stuff like that. And they could feel the craft and this idea you can go anywhere in the universe. So that's the idea that if you go anywhere instantaneously in the universe, they're not flying through time and space, over generations. They're doing it instantaneous. And then you get into the idea about the portals, where I have the thing where the 9 people in 2002 in Mount Shasta who are levitated up into the air, and these beings come, and there's more beings than there are trees in the forest. And these stories about the Zendras, where people are going in and they walk through the Zendra, and the Zendra is only about this wide. And they walk through the Zendra and they're on another planet. You just take one step and they're on another planet. That's where you start getting this idea that it's all one thing, because people will think, oh, they're doing magical or whatever. No, it's all consciousness, and there is no time and space. It's all here, it's all now, which gets the idea. How big is the universe if there's no time and space? It may be a point in space. That's it. That's all it is. It's all contained within. And that's where you get the stuff where you start looking at this idea that there's only one electron. That's what John Wheeler brought up. There's only one electron, or there's no out there. It's a participatory universe. This is the guy that was the successor to Einstein at Princeton. There's no out there. It's a participatory universe. You are part of what's happening outside. This whole idea that it's all within you. And some of these quantum physicists from the early generations, more now the quantum physics are even starting. Apparently it's the big thing in quantum physics now, is to look at consciousness. 20 years ago, it was basically illegal to talk about consciousness. You would basically lose your funding, everything. Now it's a big thing. Everybody, especially if you're retired, they're all working on consciousness. The guy who won the Nobel Prize, Josephson, he was ostracized when he was doing ESP, when he was at he'd won the Nobel Prize. And now he's working on it. And a lot of these guys in quantum physics, that's the big thing now, is to talk about quantum physics and explain, because everybody knows there's a Nobel Prize in this, to try to explain the nature of consciousness. And they haven't gotten anywhere because they've got it backwards. They think matter creates consciousness. Then it's this idea that you and I have understood for years, and that we're trying to teach other people, and that the beings are, whatever the intelligence is trying to explain to us indirectly, is this idea it's all consciousness, all here and now. There is no future, there's no past and future. It's all here, it's all now. It's all in this weird concepts of all your lives are stacked on top of a book, and you can actually interact with people in the people in the future and the people from the past. You can live a life in the past, and you start hearing this really weird stuff that basically anything's possible, because it's all done with the mind. Whatever you want to imagine yourself doing, you can do.
That's great, Grant. I'm so happy you're back in the public eye. You look like you took off took a little.
Yeah, I'll be doing an interview Thursday morning to explain that whole thing where I disappeared to, and I'm going to release a videotape by K. Randall May, who you may know as she was used by Kit Green to the CIA. They were using her as a remote viewer. Kit Green described her as being between 95 and 100% accurate. She's a medical intuitive, the most accurate medical intuitive he'd ever met in his life. And he said, I'm a physiologist, and I know when she talks about medical stuff, I don't know about the UFO stuff, but medical stuff, I'm going to release a 1-hour session she did for me, and it will explain where I went for 6 months. But it's the taping will be done. I'll be explaining what's happened, and I'll release the tape from Kay Randall May. And let me tell you, as a hint, she hit a grand slam home run. Absolutely nailed it against all the doctors that were advising me. They said one thing. She said, no, they're wrong. She said that in the middle of April, and she was right. So I'm going to release the tape. It'll be pretty exciting.
Well, I always appreciate your enthusiasm and your intelligence and the big picture that you put together. Thank you. You'll be joining us tomorrow for the disclosure panel at the Portal to Ascension. That's 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, all that, 4 p.m. Pacific. And Melinda Leslie's going to be on the panel. I'm going to try to see if Leslie Keene will be on the panel. I don't know. There's a guy named Oswald Franco who actually approached Christian Gillibrand and talked about to her. And she goes, yes, we're 100% trying to get this to be transparent. I'll play some of that video too. So there'll be a bunch of good people there, and I always appreciate your overview, because you're right. You studied the UFO White House for so long, and suddenly you switched to consciousness. You left people, but there was nowhere else to go in that field. You had this awakening and download because that seemed like it was your next level to kind of figure it all out.
That's where Jerry Pippin went after me. If you remember Jerry Pippin, the interviewer, he said, Grant, I can't believe you've done this. I can't believe you've gone from the presidential guy to the woo-woo side. And I said, well, Jerry, I'll tell you what, I really didn't go there. I kind of got teleported there. Like, I mean, it's you've had the download experiences, you know this thing. It comes with this absolute certainty. It's like you saw it before you came into the world. And then suddenly the door sort of opens up and you see it and you go, oh yeah, I remember that now. It's like, and that's what it is. It's like when somebody gives you a name, like you can't remember this person's name, and then somebody else tells the name. Oh yeah, that's the name. It pops in your head. Yeah, that's right. And it was this certainty, like this is exactly how it works. I had no choice. I mean, I just went there and I just was so, I couldn't, for 2 days, I couldn't think. I was just floored by this concept of the fact that it's all consciousness. And yet I didn't know what it meant at the time, because I'd never studied consciousness, never studied
psychology. Still figuring it out. I don't think anyone knows what it really means. We have a vague, our understanding of consciousness is it's information. It's not solid yet. It's becoming, you know.
And that's where Deepak would be right about, is the idea, I think in the Eastern, what's the Tao the Tao that is named is not the Tao. It's what we try to do when we work in this world is we change everything into nouns, and there are no nouns, like Deepak showed. It's all a verb. It's all a verb, and that's where people. So you break it into these little nouns, and then you break it all apart, and that doesn't work. It's you have to realize it's a moving system. It's alive. It's all one thing, and it's alive. It's a verb. There's no nouns.
Well, no. There's so you know, you have the you're pulling this phenomena forward. You're pushing. You have all that energy, and you know, there's a lot of movement with movies. That movie by James Fox, which I don't know. I'm going to see it soon. That Moment of Contact, Brazilian case.
My movement ahead. You'll hear Kay Randall May describe who I was in the reincarnation type things. She explains it. I don't know if I believe it, but it's pretty wild. You'll be kind of interested to see her view on it.
I'm really excited about this new book. This is Grant's latest new book, UFO Sky Pilots. Are you really happy? Are you really excited about this publication?
This is one of the most important books I think I've released, because now you can't really talk. So somebody comes up now and says they flew the craft. It doesn't mean anything, because now it's in the public. This was never in the public. Nobody knew about people flying the craft. So I think that's why it's so important that I got these people and kept it all secret until I had enough people, and then went public with it. Now it doesn't really mean anything to say it's fly craft, because it was not known when I was doing this book. People never heard of it.
Wow. Thank you, Grant. Always appreciate you. I'm glad you're back in the public eye, because you know, we need the intelligence and we need that spiritual perspective if we're going to make any progress in this field, because it's obviously not nuts and bolts, which is what you've been talking about since 2012.
I appreciate the work you've done and the people you've interviewed, and let's keep working together and do it again, and then next life we'll come back and do it again.
Well,
once we get it figured out, we'll come back and do it again.
Let's say we get off the wheel and just see it from the big picture. But I'm really happy you're a contributor to this book, because your chapter leads from Nick Pope, who's just like nuts and bolts government to the consciousness, and it becomes like more of a spiritual text, this book. And then John Mack and all that, the people that followed are just people trying to lay out the steps. And we're figuring this all out, but you're right. This is the most exciting thing any intelligent person could think about. That's what I feel. It is.
Yeah.
All right,
and when it comes to the book, you can't look at that book and believe these stories are real and not realize the importance of consciousness. This absolutely says you've got to look at consciousness. This could be a massive key to when you look at a UFO now. You're not going to see a metal thing. You're going to be wondering, like, is it alive? And the whole concept changes. And the idea of consciousness is fundamental to this whole story. And so to me, it's a big changer for me in terms of the way I saw it. And because I said when I first heard it, I thought the woman I was going to throw her out of the house. I thought she was insane. Like, I'd never heard anything like it in my life. But then people started coming. So hopefully we'll do it, and then we'll do the Apport book down the road. We'll have a little chat about that, because that's another important story that I'm trying to put out that has not really been told. And piece by piece, we're putting it together. And it's like, as I said, we are the ones we've been waiting for. And in terms of the military and all this other stuff, you go to the old Pogo cartoon, we have met the enemy and he is us. The idea that we have this separation idea and we want to go to war, but we got to realize we are one, we are all one with the universe. And you and I are some of the few people that are actually pushing the edge of this thing. You've been on the edge longer than I have, I think, pushing this issue. And I think we just keep doing it, and that's all we can do. Do the best you can. You're on the Super Bowl field, and when it's all over, as Michael Newton said, because he did the 7,000 regressions, and he said everybody that went in front of this panel, where he said they all had the same answer when he said how was it, and he said everybody said the same thing. I could have done better. Oh, I forgot to do this, I forgot to do that. So I think you and I will have forgotten to do some stuff, but I appreciate you for the work you've done over all the years.
Oh, thanks. That's really nice coming from you, because you're one of the leaders in the field. And I'm excited about, this was a step for you. What else is going to unfold that will just blow our minds? That at first we say, no, that's impossible. And then we say, well, maybe, it's like we have to integrate it. And then it's like we bring it out and say, yeah, this is the next level. So I'm excited about the unknown.
Yeah, that's the way. And it's like an exciting movie. That's the idea we have your ups and downs and go round and round and all this kind of stuff. But it's like a movie, and the more it's like God is watching the movie and he wants it exciting. He wants the ups and downs, and you're up against you and I are up against this world that believes in materialism, and we're fighting against materialism, and we're trying to win, and then we get taken down, and then we fight back, and in the end we win the movie. That's what God's looking for in a movie. He wants it exciting. That's a challenge. Otherwise, it's like sitting there and watching, somebody sit there and drink Mai Tais on the side of a beach in Miami. It's like just crazy. Well,
it's a never-ending story. I mean, there's no winning. It's just a progression into who knows what.
Well, we're moving ahead. Yeah, we're shifting it ahead. We're evolving in terms of the universe is evolving, getting more complex, and we are evolving and getting more complex. And we are more. You can't blame the people at the bottom, because if I hadn't had the experiences I had, I'd be just as stupid as everybody else. Because we have these experiences, and then you do what you can with it. So I don't I don't get angry at people who don't get it, because everybody's at their own level. The message is not for everybody, but when you have the message, the onus is on you and I to do what we can to get it out. And if we believe it's right, and hopefully that moves the ball down the field and gets closer to a more evolved thing that can move to the 5th generation or whatever is going to happen. Really doesn't matter what happens. It just matters what you and I do here, now, and in the present. And so thank you.
No, it's right. I agree that we keep moving the ball down the field and the goalposts keep moving, but that's okay. We'll catch up. Right.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, Grant.
Beautiful.
Thanks.
Thank you, Alan.
Talk to you. I appreciate the